Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Today on the show, I would like to welcome Carole Jean Whittington, who is a trailblazer in the wellness space, dedicated to guiding those who are experiencing burnout to become energy masters, where abundant energy is their daily norm. She is the author of Unleashing Sustainable Energy and host of the popular podcast Beyond Chronic Burnout. As a Chief Energy Officer of Whittington Wellbeing, her company stands out as one of the few companies that provides a tested methodology focusing on chronic burnout for minds of all kinds. Welcome, Carole Jean.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Summer.
I am excited to have you. So we're going to start out with this question. If you could describe your journey in one word to this point, what would that word be and why?
Alignment.
Ooh, I haven't gotten that one yet. That's great. Tell me more.
You know, in my global spicy research over the last 3 years, I've looked at burnout in a variety of places. And burnout doesn't just show up for one neurotype or in one location. You know, we hear in the ICD-11, oh, it's, work related, right? Yeah. And we hear that as in the wellness space a lot. However, I think we all know that's a load of hooey. Stress doesn't just come from one place. It comes from all directions, right?
Yes. That's why, just as a side note, that's why as a clinician and working in the mental health field for so long, we used to look at the 5 axes diagnosis, just because it's not just one place where it comes from.
Exactly. And I think just from the general populace standpoint, we're like, oh, well, I'm not experiencing it necessarily at work. Like, that's the place I escape to. It's everywhere else, right?
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, maybe it's not burnout. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's depression. All of these other things we start to identify when we don't have this clear understanding of what burnout actually is. And when I say alignment, for me, I experienced my very first burnout at the age of 6. And that was after doing a lot of current work. When I turned 40 almost a decade ago, It was, now that I understand what burnout is for me, where have I started to notice the pattern in my history, right? And so then I do a history of burnout, and in that, I could start to pick up the thread, the similarities. Each burnout in each season of our life is going to be a little different in how we experience that burnout and how it might show up, or to what degree it may show up in a particular area. But there is a consistent commonality for each person. And when I started to see that, what I recognized was, when I started to align with my inner self, when I started to look at what had I actually been camouflaging, like masking to the professional level is what I call it. When we have masked to the professional level of camouflaging, then that comes down to the top 3 things that I identified in my research. And I look at all different neurotypes experiencing burnout, all different physical abilities experiencing burnout, and people who have co-occurring health conditions in burnout. What do all of those different buckets say they look, feel, and experience burnout? And when I looked at that for myself and I applied that, and I started to look at what those patterns were, and I started to look at, where am I starting to feel differently? Where do I feel the biggest energy drain? Right? Where's the place that I feel most depleted most often? And when I started to peel back the layers, the reason alignment was so important is because in my research, but also in my own personal life, the number one unmet nourishment key, and I say nourishment key versus human need, because need is a pushing away. Nourishment is a pulling too,
Yeah,
right? Messaging and language has its own frequency and direction, right? And how it impacts our
absolutely.
physical body.
Yeah.
So when I looked at what is that unmet nourishment key, it's emotional safety. And it isn't external. There is external, but where most of us are feeling most depleted in our energy, it's internal emotional safety. Do I feel safe to feel my own physical feelings first? Do I have a way to understand or process them, especially if we process? And for those people who have trauma and who are neurodistinct, and I say neurodistinct versus divergent for
Mm,
other languaging things. So
yeah.
when I talk about alignment and I talk about what emotional safety really means internally for me, I had to begin to feel aligned within first. And then I began to feel safety. I began to feel grounded. I began to feel confident, and trust is the other one. Trust my own thoughts and decisions. And that truly has been the whole heart of how I am now entering year 4+ of being burnout free for the first time in 40 years.
Wow. And that takes reflection, it takes work, it takes identifying where this has come from, how this started, how this grew, how you nurtured this in a way, because it became your habit and it might have been conscious or not. There's so many variables that play into this. And when you mention season of life, it's funny because when I look back, not just on my whole life, but when I look at a year during those different seasons, different things happen to me mentally and physically. And so I've noticed that my energy runs a little higher in the spring and it starts, I'm like, why am I so excited, in March? Well, it's not just my birthday month, but it's an exciting time. There's more sun, there's more of this, there's more that. It's even as simple as maybe the time of year, maybe the time of month. Just identifying those things are so important. I like how you mentioned alignment and feeling that from within, because it's not our exterior as much as within, and being able to understand your own energy, where you're placing that energy. I talked about something yesterday about forcing energy. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, we come into our dreams, our vision with a lot of energy. And there are certain things as we develop where maybe it's, for me, it's posting every day and posting continuously, that I'm like, I am forcing this energy. I need to give this up somehow. And I need to, there's certain things that you identify where do you want to place that energy? How do you want to grow that energy? How do you want to nurture that energy? And then how do you become trusting of yourself by understanding where your energy is flowing and being okay with that, but understanding like you can shift that energy very easily. But a lot of times things have become so habitual, we overlook that. So I love what you're saying here because there's just so much to it. And I love that you have a method. We'll talk about your burnout quiz later on, but let's talk about some of the key events in your life that pointed to your passion and the direction of wellness, burnout, and moving beyond burnout. And you did touch on it and where that might have started at a young age.
It did, but I'll tell you, until I got out of burnout in a sustained way long enough to allow space to develop trust within myself. And that began with being impeccable with my word to me first. I was impeccable with my word to my own detriment to everyone else, but not to myself. And when I started to experience internal self-love, even if it just began with, I will hold space for you for, 10 seconds uh, in a tiny little hand mirror, that built this place where I could begin to trust, but to also have the energy and have the consistent, sustainable energy to be able to explore what are my passions? What are my strengths? Because so much of our life, we are told what we're really good at. We may excel at things and it's no big deal to us. And we have a natural strength in areas, but is it a passion?
Yes.
And those two things are different. Strengths and passions are different. But when we align them, go back to that word alignment, when we align those and we identify these are my strengths. And a lot of times it's interesting. When I did Clifton Strengths last year in December, as I was reading through them, I'm like, oh yes, that makes so much sense. But I had not thought of them as my strength. I thought of them as, oh, that's just me.
Yeah.
And I hadn't identified what that really meant as a strength. So then when I said, okay, these are my strengths, what lights me up? And I say, and I always love to ask new connections this, especially over on LinkedIn, what sparks your joy? Because several years ago, I was going through a certification and training program, and the leader of that group was pointing out the difference between joy and happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, a lot of times when we look at happiness and we're seeking happiness, it's an external thing because happiness is based on happenings. What is happening in my external world that then creates this internal experience of happiness? And she said, then there's joy. And she said, joy is a state of being. It is an internal state that we intentionally and consciously choose. And this light switch flipped, and I went, oh, never again will I ever seek happiness. I will be joyful.
I love that. And that's exactly what I say as well. That happiness is external. Your joy is from within.
And these are all gradual things. I mean, this did not happen overnight. These happens in, growth and change happens in these start and stop moments, these stretch and recede moments, this ebb and flow. And as I was moving through this to identify my passions, what is it that lights me up? What sparks my joy? And I had learned to feel what joy was internally and not seeking it externally. So that allowed this place to go, these strengths, these things that I know I've always known, but now I have this sort of concrete understanding. Clifton Strengths says I am woo, W-O-O, winning over others. And I was like, ooh, I don't know about that. That could be misinterpreted, right? It's not. It's this magnetism. It's the joy that I experience that people are drawn to. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing because it then goes to my discovery. But all of those passions that I have, they align with my strengths in a way that says, and I have 5 passion drivers in life. And this is exactly how I live. And it is how my business operates. And it is number 1, awe and wonderment. I absolutely adore and am open to and am always seeking just from a place of receiving and noticing. What are the beautiful lights within each person? What does that look like? What does that feel like? That is beautiful. And I just see it and it lights me up inside. And then the second passion driver is discovery. I love to go and say to that light, I want to know more about you. I want to discover what is at the heart of that beautiful light that I see. The third is combustion. I adore connecting people. I adore to see, this light right here, it's a little blue color, and this light right here is a little green color, and I think these two need to meet. Because when I introduce people who have similar passions or similar interest, then that ignition, that spark that happens between them, that is the third passion driver I have, which is combustion. And when they combust, they ripple out into the world, and that impacts all of us. And that goes to one of my last and strongest passion drivers, which is what I call bioluminescence. And I grew up on the Gulf of Mexico, and I love to swim at night. And when you swim in the ocean at night, there's that phosphorus on the surface, especially in the summer. You got to avoid the jellyfish and the seaweed clumps sometimes, but, and I would love to lift my arms up in my hair and I would just sparkle and glow. And it's that bioluminescence. And I look at that when we start to connect and we are combusting and we've ignited and we are causing these ripple effects in the world, then we are each connecting humanity. And when we're doing that, we are elevating one another. When we are talking about our energy and our energy mastery, we talk about emotional contagion in psychology, and it's how are my internal, my so within, so without, my beginning within, my alignment, how is that rippling out and affecting and impacting other people? What am I spreading?
It's just so impactful. You laid it out so brilliantly and lovely that I was in a state of like almost meditation as you were laying it out, because it was like, I can feel this. I can feel your passion. You're in alignment with it. You glow when you talk about it. It just rolls off your tongue so magnificently and magically, you can feel it. Thank you for sharing those very important aspects of what lights you up. And I like to call that our passion, our purpose, and our impact. What's your passion? What's your purpose? What's your impact? Let's talk about your book. You are the author of Unleashing Sustainable Energy. Give us a brief synopsis of this book and where readers can find it.
It is exclusively on my website through Hyperlexic Publishing. And when this book published September 1st of 2023, it broke glass ceilings in the publishing industry. I had taken this book proposal to many different publishing houses, and I got a lot of yeses. However, when I would say, it is very important to me that we provide multiple accessibility features for this book, and it all needs to be for one price. And I would get, oh, we can do the audiobook. That's no problem. We can do a dyslexic font or an easier bionic, easier to read font, but we'd have to charge for that. And when I said, I also need to make sure that we have video with closed captions, everyone went, no, sorry, we can't do that. And I thought after the third, fourth one, well, you know what? I'll just do it myself.
Yeah.
So Hyperlexic Publishing was born so that it is one of the most accessible publishing houses now. And we publish the book for one price, and it includes open dyslexic font, easy to read font, an audio version, as well as video with closed captions. And the reason that is because in burnout, irrespective of your neurotype, it is very inclusive, because when we are in burnout, we experience a shift and an impact in how we process and learn and take in information. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make sure no matter who came to get this book, they could access the life-giving and life-saving information that it provides.
Oh, brava, Carole Jean. That is so awesome. Well, congratulations. That's phenomenal. Thank you for offering your book to the world and for allowing us to digest it and take it in different ways, because there's all different and diverse types of learners. And so I love that you took that into your own hands, publishing your own book, and you changed the way that could happen. When people tell us no, guess what we want to do? We want to say yes. So
Exactly. So the book itself is a layout, the blueprint, the step-by-step of my methodology that I have used and tested over the last decade. And it is the unveiling method. And I call it the unveiling method because for so many of us, we have masked or cloaked and camouflaged to that professional level. And this is an unveiling of you. And the book provides all of the assessments. And in the book, I tell you very directly, assessments are great, but they are absolutely worthless if you do not have a framework and a guide, a map to help you apply it.
Absolutely. If I were to go somewhere, like a sermon or a talk or seminar, and I feel inspired and I leave that place and I'm like, yes, I'm so excited. The next day, I'm thinking, I'm still excited, except how do I put these steps into place? Were the steps explained to me? Was there a roadmap of some sort? And then I feel like, man, was I just set up for failure in a certain way because I didn't get a roadmap? Come on, I want to hold on to this, right? And so then I try and figure out my own. So it's really nice when you do have that roadmap or those steps, because it's a beginning. It doesn't mean that's going to be your process exactly, but it certainly is a framework for a beginning for you. I love that you offer those steps. So thank you. Now, tell us about your podcast, Beyond Chronic Burnout. Where can people watch this?
So you can watch or listen. We are on over 10 podcast platforms. So wherever you listen, you can find Beyond Chronic Burnout. We also are on YouTube. We were a top 5% podcast in 2022 on Spotify in the self-help category, which was really exciting. This year, I think we have exceeded reaching over 96 countries and over 500,000 people. It is what I started, I guess, over 3 years ago now. And in this journey of burnout, I was discovering I'm late identified autistic and ADHD. And so part of the conversation, a lot of this is layering in those elements and those different experiences of burnout, because what I recognized is I do a lot of corporate work. So as I'm going into large companies, especially over the last year, this has been what's been very interesting. I have so many people that are raising their hands. They're going, as I go over the internal warning signs of burnout, because it happens internally and externally. We feel it and recognize it internally that, this is burnout, or I begin to feel it. So I identify now as I can find some resources. This could be burnout for me. However, there's the second place, but it's actually the first place burnout shows up, and that's in our external environment. We have external signposts that say, hey, pay attention, Carole Jean. You are starting to experience stress in your external world. It's showing up before you feel it. What I was noticing is all of these people are experiencing internal warning signs. And this is a collection of top 20 warning signs I've put together for a variety of neurotypes, a variety of physical experiences and abilities and co-occurring health conditions. However, when I started to dig in and say, hey, some of these things are coming from different experiences and perspectives, and it could be why you've been in burnout for so long or can't seem to fully get out of burnout. You feel like you've gotten out for a little bit, and then next thing you know, you're right back in it. And I call that the restoration illusion trap, because what I've identified is I have a scale of burnout from a poblano level pepper 1, where you got a little bit of heat, all the way up to a ghost pepper level 5, where you're so hot you're not, and your body begins to shut down.
Yeah, right.
And within those pepper levels, we have degrees of heat, right? So, am I closer to a level 4, or am I moving closer to a level 3? But within that, we can have something that happens that becomes like, that's our norm if we've been hanging out at a 4 for a really long time, and we just think we're in burnout when we slip into a 5 for a little bit. And then something changes and the stress reduces, and we go back down to maybe a lower level 4 than we were before. And so we think we're out of burnout, but we're not. And so all of these things really make an impact when we're talking about how are we unveiling and what does that look like. So the talk show really started for me to go, I want to hear as many different experiences of burnout from as many different people, a variety of people from all over the world, what that means for them, how they've experienced it, because I only have one experience, mine, and I have the stories of others, but I wanted others to share their story so that people who have felt like, I'm just broken, I am not adulting well enough, or I haven't figured this out, or I feel so alone, nobody really gets me, and this sucks. I wanted them to have a place to find someone. Because I always say, I may not be your jam. I may be strawberry and you like raspberry with no seeds, or you like grape, or you like, lemon curd or something. I'm going to introduce you to your flavor.
Yeah. Well, I love how you have all these resources and this method that really creates a map for people to look at and say, okay, I understand this. I can digest this. But because we are also diverse, when you talk about your levels, those 5 different peppers and that energy level, my number 3 could look very different than your number 3. That's because my palette is different. Now, I'm using that as an example because the way we feel, or the level of number 3, it could be attached to very quickly by somebody else, where it takes a while for me to get to number 3. And yet you would know. But here you are giving the tools and tips for people to be able to identify this. And that's so important, because I think a lot of times we go through life and we have created these habits that we're not recognizing that we're in a number 4, or that we're in burnout at a number 5. And then also what we can do about it. And you also have a burnout quiz, which people can find on your website.
Absolutely. It's how spicy is your burnout. Now it will tell you from a poblano pepper level 1 all the way up to a ghost pepper level 5. And it'll also tell you, hey, you are mild and not even in any kind of heat. You're actually doing pretty well. And here's some additional things for you to continue doing that. Like, you're not a pepper, you're not in burnout. What's really lovely is that this quiz looks at the key impact areas of burnout in a much broader sense. It's much more inclusive of all neurotypes and all physicalities than Matchlock. So it looks at, how does this impact your sleep? How does this impact your emotional regulation? How does this impact your communication from a variety of places? How does this look for executive function for you? How does this look at your cognitive load ability? All of those things are impacted. And we look at every one of those, including your sensory system and all 8 areas of your sensory system. And it takes less than 3 minutes.
All right. So thank you so much. There's so much here. People can listen to the podcast. They can get your book. They can go to your website and take a quiz. There's so much that you're giving here, which is so wonderful. We've covered so much. We could go and delve deeper into this on so many different levels. I want to ask you so many questions, but this is a half an hour. So as we come to the close of the interview, my last question is, if you were to give the listeners one tip to guide them in the direction of becoming their own energy master, what would it be?
You have mastered one side of energy already. So I want you to just give yourself a hug, pat yourself on the back, like literally reach around, say, yes, you did this. You have mastered the heck out of this. You have mastered where your energy goes out. The most important and the most critical step is to now take a moment and look at, where does it go out? Make a note. Be specific and identify, where do you feel most drained and depleted? But I want you to look at the opposite side, because there is a universal law of reciprocity here. I want you to look at, what are the things that energize me? What lights me up? What sparks my joy? What gives me like the juicy goodness burst where I'm like, oh, this is so good. I love this. I'm excited. I want you to make a list of those things. I want you to know, when it happens, who are the people in your life that have a contribution to that feeling. And I want you to start saying, where do I want more of this in my life? And I want you to put a little note in that physical space and say, I want more this, and put what that is in that area.
Thank you, Carole Jean, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Summer. This was fantastic.
This was wonderful. You can follow Carole Jean Whittington on LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok at Carole Jean Whittington, and on Facebook at Whittington Wellbeing and at whittingtonwellbeing.com.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.